You want to start out when I met your grandfather?
Yeah, let's start there.
Well, I met your grandpa through my grandmother. She cleaned houses for people that had a gravel pit, and she didn't have a car. And so the boys that drove the trucks would bring her into town on Friday night and then pick her up again on Monday. And she'd tell me, oh, what a nice boy Richard Moomey was. I'd heard that so many times. Well, my girlfriend and I used to go to the dances on Saturday night in Alma, and he was there with his friends. So we danced by him, and I said, hi, Richard Moomey. And of course, he didn't know who I was. So we danced around a couple of times, my friend and I. Pretty soon he come and asked me to dance, and took me home and that night. And so 2 years later, we got married. And I was 19 and he was 21.
Okay, I was gonna ask how old you were.
Yeah.
You know.
And so he had a good job at Oldsmobile, and I loved it down there.
Sure.
Yeah. And I lived in town all my life, but I knew he wanted to farm.
Sure.
So his dad worked the lumber yard, and the people who had owned the lumber yard had an interest in this farm. And so they asked his dad if we'd be interested
in this
coming
farm?
up here.
Oh, okay, sure.
And so we came up one day and looked it over, and he wanted to milk cows. He loved cattle, and of course had the nice barn. And we thought, well, we could make it here, and we knew it had all the woods, and so we rented it for 3 years for $50 a year.
Okay.
They said if we would pay the taxes, and that's how much the taxes were on 520 acres.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow. And what year was this?
We came to spring of 1950.
Okay.
Yeah. And we had to live in the little tenant house because people who had lost the property they never made a payment. And, they didn't want to move out, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
And so, was that the house that used to be here in the...
No, that was the old farmhouse.
Okay.
There was a little 3-room tenant house over there where that chimney is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I wondered what that chimney was for.
Yeah.
Oh. So 3 years you lived there.
Yeah.
And then
we bought it.
And then you bought it, and they moved out successfully.
No, they moved out in a few weeks after we got here.
Sure.
But he had $1,500, so he bought a International H tractor, an old Oliver plow that never did work, and 5 cows.
Huh?
We didn't know a soul. I don't think we were too smart. We come up here and we thought we were pioneers on an adventure.
Sure,
Yeah.
you were.
Yeah.
You know.
So, and we thought if we could pay for this farm in our lifetime, then that would be our retirement. We would have security, And we figured we could always sell the lumber.
Oh, sure.
And make the payments. And the first winter we got here, it was 36 below one night.
Oh, wow.
And the next morning, here pulls in some lumber trucks. And they said, we're going to cut the timber down on this place. And we said, no, you're not. They said, well, we are. We've got a legitimate contract. So the people that never made a payment on a farm sold the timber.
Oh, wow. Did they get the
money.
proceeds? Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they come back and they had a legal contract.
Oh, wow.
So they cut it off. And
Huh.
so there went that theory.
Sure.
Yeah.
How much of the farm did they cut?
Well, they cut
Quite
most
a
of the
lot.
woods.
Oh,
yeah.
no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, so most of the woods that are here have been a regrowth since the 50s.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's 70 years ago.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. As it went along, you started doing maple syrup and...
That was years
kinda...
later.
Okay.
Yeah. We tapped the maple trees, and
Sure.
that was a good crop because it cost you nothing to harvest it.
Sure.
Except your time, and
Yep.
and you went and gathered up the sap, and we had bought a evaporator, which is a modern cooker that had flues in it, and,
Oh, okay.
and it worked its way through, and from where it started, and when it got to the end, then it was
Oh,
maple
okay.
syrup.
Sure, as opposed to like a big vat that
Yeah,
you would
yeah.
boil
An open
down.
kettle, yeah.
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Mm.
So the first year you had 5 cows, and did you start plowing and,
Oh, yes.
and planting?
And the fields were only 3 acres and 4 acres.
Oh, wow.
We didn't farm in Gratiot County because it cost way too much money to buy land down there.
Oh, sure.
So,
Huh, interesting. Well, you were very successful and years later, so you
yes.
paid off. Yeah.
We had a lot of adventures on the way. I was going to tell you about some of the misfortunes.
Oh, yeah.
One year, the top rib of the barn fell in.
Oh, wow.
He come in the house, and it was a heavy snow, exceptionally heavy, and the whole top of the barn fell in.
Sure.
And of course, the insurance said if this roof would have fell outside the barn, we'd have paid for it, but it fell inside, so you get nothing. But the neighbors all come and helped us put the roof back on.
Sure.
And then one year, my mother had surgery, and I went down to stay with my dad, and we got a call and said my Aunt Donna worked at the Greyhound bus station.
Mm-hmm.
She said there's some poor farmer up to Marion that his cattle are dropping dead, and we're sending a special serum to
give
get
you
them over it.
Yeah.
Well, we probably lost 19 that day.
Oh, wow.
And Richard called me that night, and he told me that our cattle had a disease called blackleg,
Oh.
and they just dropped dead.
Huh.
And
they needed some kind of vaccine?
yeah, well, the vaccine. Yeah,
Sure.
used a vaccine and
Okay.
saved the rest of them.
Oh, wow. Huh.
So, used to pick a lot of rocks.
I like to tell the story of me still in college and coming back to the cabin, and Grandpa saying, well, you're an engineering student. You know, that maple tree had fallen in and it started to erode the bank. And he said, how did you stop, the erosion of this bank? And I said, well, I'd put riprap in there. I'd put a lot of rock in there. And he said, well, that's a good idea. Let's go get some rock. And I thought for sure we were going to one of the many rock piles that were already there. And nope, he got the whole family together. And sure enough, we went through the fields and picked out rocks and put them in the bucket and then went back there and dropped them in. And
Oh, gosh.
and I always tell the story that way, and then I say, if I had thought about it, I should have told him to put logs in there instead of rocks. It saved us from picking all those rocks.
Yeah.
But,
You weren't too smart?
no, I thought I had a smart answer, but it kind of backfired on me. Tell me about your siblings.
Well, I had 2 brothers. I'm the oldest. I was born in 1930. That's the beginning of the Depression. Mm-hmm. And my mother worked out a lot, and so I babysat them. And they always thought I was kind of mean to them, but I told them they didn't add too much to the quality of my life.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dick, the older one, went to Michigan State to college, and then went to Alabama, worked on went to the Redstone Arsenal, and he worked on the Apollo, I think.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He took computer science.
Oh, sure. Huh.
And then he got the bug to go to Alaska.
Sure.
And so they spent most of their life in Alaska, and they had 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. And he left IBM and decided to sell real estate. And that's when they had the real estate bust, and so. And my other brother, Doug, worked to the Oldsmobile.
Mm-hmm.
He retired from there. And he had 3 children. And, but we were raised in Alma. And when the Depression started, my dad was lucky if he could find a job for $1 a day.
Sure.
But $1 went a long ways then, like a nickel for a loaf of bread,
Sure.
a nickel for a dozen eggs,
Yep.
And the Depression didn't seem so bad because everybody was in the same situation. Nobody had anything, and
So you all helped each other and
Yeah, and everybody was the same. You didn't feel there was no class
Sure.
distinction. Nobody was better than the other.
Sure.
And we really didn't realize that we had so little. You know, we never went hungry, and we didn't have an abundance of, much of anything. But my dad always had a big garden, and they always canned lots of things out of the garden, which is, there's nothing any better than that you could eat.
Sure.
Yeah. And one year, my mother got me a little blue jumper and a little white blouse with flowers embroidered on it, and I wore it every day to school. And I've never bought anything royal blue since then.
that was your fill of royal blue.
Oh my gosh. And then in the spring, the Sears catalog came out, and if you bought one dress, you got 2 free.
Oh.
So it showed the samples of what you could get, but you couldn't pick anything. So she sent for them, and all 3 dresses were exactly the same.
Oh. Oh, that's pretty funny.
But we were poor enough that most of our shoes were leather and had leather soles on them.
Sure.
And you'd wear a hole in them. So Dad would cut a insole out of the cornflakes box, and you'd wear that till it either got wet or it wore out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Huh.
You made do. You used everything you had.
Sure.
But we were happy. We were all together. And it was a time when you were safe,
Sure.
We'd go out and play and come in for lunch and go back out and play.
Yeah.
And at night, when it got dark, you knew you were supposed to go home, but you were safe. And
Tell me a little more about your parents. I was fortunate enough to meet your mother, but I never was able to meet your father.
Well, his father came right from Germany,
Okay.
and his mother did too. And they didn't speak English. And his father was a meat man, a sausage maker, had his own little shop. And his first wife died, and he married the neighbor lady that had a farm. And he wanted to homestead in Canada. So he took his oldest son and went up there, and that's where my dad was born then, in Canada.
Okay.
But they didn't stay in Canada. They came back to Alpena, Michigan, and that's where he lived most of his
Sure.
life.
And what was the draw to Alpena?
He had a sister there.
Okay.
And in those days, when you immigrated to this country, someone had to sign for you and
Sure.
have a job for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why they came there.
Okay.
But my grandmother was special needs. And when my grandpa died, she must have been kind of mean, because my dad quit school and worked on a dairy farm, and she took all his money. And then just for meanness, she wouldn't let him in the house at night. And so there was a factory in Alpena that moved to Alma, and he and the other boys then, they were working there at the time, moved to Alma. And
Okay.
my mother's parents are English and Irish, and my mother was a beautiful redhead, and
Yes, she was.
yeah, and so she lost 2 children. And when I was little, there was me, and then I had a baby sister, Margaret Ann, and they died of 2 childhood diseases like whooping cough and measles.
Sure.
And then there was my brother Dick, and then Shirley Ann died of the same thing. They lived maybe a year and a half.
Sure.
And, those were hard times.
Yeah.
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 But my dad was a hard worker and really good guy.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
You know, when did he pass away?
He was 54 years old. He got prostate cancer. And He was born 1910, so it must have been
Okay.
64.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I wasn't
My
sure.
mother lived to be 82. You asked me about good memories of Richard. He was a good guy, great husband, and we really miss him. He had quite a sense of humor, and he was a big part of our family. But he didn't want any children, so
So how did you persuade him into?
But his grandmother had said to him, I hope you, when you get married, you have a little girl. So we had Linda, and that was just fine. And 3 years later, we had Janet. And then there's 7 years later, we had LD. And he loved the kids. And they loved him.
Oh.
And, you know, so sometimes I would say to him, well, you didn't want any children. Which one shall we get rid of? But he never could pick one.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Could never make
He
that
liked them
decision.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they grew on him.
Yeah, I
Yep.
guess so. But we had a good life, and when he had his own business, you know, selling nuts and bolts and plow point and elevator teeth, so in the winter we could go where we wanted to and work, and we traveled and went to Arizona and went to Florida. We'd go to Cheyenne to the rodeos in summer when there was slack times in farming, and
Mm-hmm.
he had a real good business, and Richard was well liked, and
Sure.
he was easygoing, good natured,
Yeah.
and he liked everybody. And
And everyone liked him.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Sounds like you traveled the nation pretty well.
we traveled pretty good. We
Yeah.
never got to go to Yosemite.
Mm.
Always wanted to do that.
Sure.
But yeah, we were over a lot of the states.
Yeah. You know.
He was a good traveling person too, because if you seen something you thought was interesting and wanted to stop, you
Sure.
always stop and look at it. So
Yeah.
we have so many good memories.
Sure.
You know.
You know.
Yeah.
I remember traveling with Grandpa when we went to Florida,
Yes.
and I still remember pulling into a gas station, and I find this so funny. A young couple came up and asked what the motorhome got for gas mileage.
Yeah.
And he looked at him and he said, if you got to ask that question, you can't afford it. And
That's
that
right.
was the end of that.
He had a weird sense of humor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think an invention is that most affected your life?
Well, probably the one that you appreciate the most is the washing machine.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know.
I never had to wash by hand. I had a wringer washer Maytag, but we had electricity when we came here, but we didn't have running water, and we had an outside toilet. And
Sure.
so on wash day or the day before, you would carry all your wash water and heat it on the stove, and you'd have to dip it into the wash machine and wash, and then you'd have to carry it all out and dump it. And
Sure.
when Larry was a baby, I got a job as township treasurer. So I took my first salary and bought an automatic washer and dryer.
Mm.
Gee, I thought I died and went to heaven,
I bet.
you know.
Imagine the amount of time that saved you, afforded
the
you
work.
so
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know. What's a quality or trait that you'd like to pass on, or that you hope you passed on?
Quality or trait? Well, I think most of you have it. You came from a background of hardworking, honest people that contribute to the world, make it a better place to live in, and contribute to society. You know, you've all made something of your lives that we're proud of, all of you. And I think a lot of it was your background. You got a lot of from your grandparents
Sure.
and your parents,
Mhm.
you know. Well, I'm certainly happy to have my home here and this farm and the income to be able to do whatever I want to do.
Sure.
And I'm so blessed to have the children and grandchildren I do that care about me, and since I'm losing my eyesight, just take care of all my needs and do it very happily, and
Sure.
just improves the quality of my life, and
Yeah.
I'm so blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never thought I'd live this long, and most of my friends and all my family are gone. you
Sure.
know.
Sure.
So,
I have the question, what do you miss about the good old days? Is that a question you could answer?
I miss a lot.
Yeah.
We had leisure time, you know. We didn't live in this rush world.
Sure.
Hurry here and hurry there, and we just, and it's so uncertain now.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many scary things happening that you have no control over.
Sure.
And people have always had things to fear, but not as much as we seem to have now.
Sure.
It's coming from us, fires and
Yeah.
floods and tornadoes and
Yeah.
hurricanes and terrorists and
Yeah. Yeah.
pandemics. And
Yeah. What do you think of today's world? You've seen so much in your life.
it's just a puzzle. I have no idea. It's so different and changing, and you have so little control over it that it would be hard to predict what was going to happen. Of course, if you read the Bible, that tells you what the end is. But
Sure.
how far have we got to go before then?
Right.
You know,
Yep.
there's still a lot of good in this world.
Mm-hmm.
It is a beautiful world.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Our trees still grow, our plants still
Yep.
produce,
Yeah.
and you know,
Yeah.
we are in the greatest country there is.
Mhm.
We have freedoms, and we can pretty much do what we want
Yeah.
when we want it.
Yep.
If we work hard enough.
No.
That's still basically true.
I think what you've seen and what you know and what you understand, like, is priceless. You can't appreciate wisdom until you start to gain some.
Oh,
And you have a lot of it, and you've seen a lot, and so, I appreciate that for sure.
well, part of my wisdom comes from at 17, I knew everything, and I knew how to solve all the world's problems. It was very simple.
Yes.
And now I've gotten to the age where I don't know anything,
Yeah.
you know.
Yep. Well,
Been good
been
talking to
a
you.
pleasure. Always a pleasure.
If I was going to give you any advice,
Oh,
all
yeah.
of you grandchildren and great-grandchildren,
Yeah.
my advice would be to make God important in your life. It always was important in our life, you know. The Bible is the greatest guidebook that you can get of how to live the better life. And to realize that God loves you, doesn't matter what you do, He'll forgive you, and He'll always love you,